And this is a team that I believe you guys both had as a top 4 seed last year. Evidently, they
I
showed they could
did.
do that when they're
I
healthy,
did.
but when not healthy, that proved to be another question. We'll start with you, Reek. What do you see from the Pelicans heading in the next year?
Didn't I thought you had them top 4 too though, Dev? Or did you have them like
I
5?
think I had them top 6. It might
Okay,
have been
okay,
5 or
that's fair.
6, but it's just
Okay.
outside top 4.
It's a funny transition because I feel like the way I'm kind of thinking about OKC is exactly how I felt about New Orleans last season. Like I was expecting, you know, they did make the playoffs, but I was expecting like that jump into them being one of the more competitive teams, you know, a top 4 team as I did have them. But this year, man, it's a tough outlook, man. I mean, while I love what Brandon Ingram brings to the table, what I love what Zion brings to the table, those guys have both missed a lot of time over the last couple seasons. You know, Bi only played 45 games last season. I think Zion played 29 or something like that. Like not a lot of time on the court. These guys were never on the court together, and that goes for CJ McCollum as well, who maybe took a little bit of a step back last season as well. So I don't really know how to feel about this team. It's definitely not as positive as it was last season because it just seems like the injury bug is a recurring theme on this team. And if it happens once, it might be an accident, but anything past one time, it's more of a trend. And, you know, I can't really trust this team to stay healthy at all. Can I trust CJ to get back to how he was playing that second half of the season when he got to New Orleans? I don't know. He looked kind of rough, especially towards the back half of the season last year. So, you know, I guess the positive signs is like, you know, Trey Murphy really ascended last season. He had a big year 2 jump. I'm still want to see like what Dyson Daniels can bring to the table and stuff, but definitely not as positively thinking about this team as I was going into last season. But maybe injury luck can be on their side this season. That would be a big dub because this was a team that was a 1 seed, I think after like 25 or 30 games last season, and then all the injuries piled on, and that was with just Zion playing. So if they could just get like 50, 60 games of Zion, CJ, Ingram, that would be lovely. But we haven't seen that yet, and I don't expect if we'll be able to be lucky enough to see it this season.
Yeah, one thing I know about the Pelicans for certain is that Willie Green is going to have them as a winning basketball team. Despite all of the injuries they went through, despite who's in this game, who's out this game, this team has found a way to either sneak into the playoffs by coming through the play-in or just finish over 500 or just stay afloat or do whatever they need to do no matter who is out there. And I think that just goes to the coaching staff and also the depth of this team. Like they're probably at least like 10, 11 deep with quality players who, while maybe not like a playoff rotation, can definitely give you quality production in a regular season rotation. So there's always going to be a lot on this team to like and to enjoy, and I think they're a tough win for anybody any night, all 82 games of the season, no matter who's there. But when you look at this team's upside, it really just comes down to what's happening late in the season because I think it's almost a given at this point. Zion's going to miss some time. Even though we see pictures this offseason, oh, he looks like he's in the best shape of his career. It should be time for a huge bounce back from him. He's could be an all-star again this year, return to form, really be back on his stuff. And, you know, Brandon Ingram, I think he played like, 45, 47 games, something like that last year. He maintains his consistency a little bit more. He's out there. Either way, both of them are going to probably miss time. I don't think you can project more than 50 to 60 games for either of them. I'll say Brandon Ingram's peak is probably like 65, and I think Zion's might be 55. Even still, the problem always ends up being that when Zion is missing that time is always around playoff time when the games matter the most. If Zion's going to miss time, even if they drop games because he's missing time in like November, December, all they really need is for him to be healthy in March. If they can stay afloat till then, we saw not this season, but the season prior, when they were against the Phoenix Suns as the 8 seed, they looked very quality in that matchup, and that was with Zion out. If they have their guys healthy, they're a tough out for anyone in a playoff series because they're just that good of a roster. Especially this year, I think they get even better with just internal improvements of guys like Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. They just need Ingram and Zion to be healthy in March and April instead of being healthy in October and November. Whether that means you have to load manage them during the early parts of the season, whether that means you just don't play them for a while if they get a little dinged up and you're just like, hey, sit out a week. I don't care what they have to do. All I want to see from this team is, once again, Willie Green keeps them afloat throughout the regular season, and Zion and Brandon Ingram are ready for April. That's all I'm asking. If we get that, this team is going to look very fun and very interesting to predict come playoff time.
It's a lot to ask, though, bro.
It's a lot
really
to ask, but at the end of the day, it's really the only thing you can ask. I can't sit here and give a projection of just, I don't know. It's a if. I think they got to take the initiative into their own hands at a certain point. If we got to sacrifice some regular season production, that it is what it is, bro.
This is the player in the league that should be load managed more than anybody. Anybody. Like you said, Gabe, if you get 50 games of Zion, I don't care if that's him playing once or twice a week. I don't give a damn.
I think you win over 30 of them, to be honest. That's just my
50 games out of him. And just hopefully BI, like these last couple seasons, he's been hurt a little bit. If you can get 60 out of BI, 65 out of CJ, I think this roster's talented enough to win an amount of games to where they will be in the playoffs. But they got to load manage on because last season, it's like I think he got hurt because he was playing at such a high level every single night. And that's because CJ was out. That's because Ingram was out. And he was running with like Jose Alvarado and Herb Jones and just, quality basketball players. But he was the lone guy that really had to get going. That's before Trey Murphy really started to ascend. And he had to play at an extremely high level every single night. They need to tone that back because it's clear he's somebody that is at high risk of injury. So they got to tone that back just a little bit. Let the guy sit out as many games as he needs to. Don't let him play back-to-backs. Just rest him every opportunity that you get. If you get 47 to 52 games out of Zion, that's perfect. That is more than enough for this team.
I think you win 30. I really think you win 30 of those games, and then you just need like 10 to 15 wins without him.
He's that good.
You are in a solid spot, and you're in a solid spot.
He's that good. He's that good, and if Ingram's there too, I think those two together are that good to where they can beat any team on any given night with both of those guys on the floor.
Yeah, he really is that special. Whether like you guys say, whether it's load management, whether you have a pretty consistent minutes restriction on him throughout the season, I don't know what's best for him because Zion's such a weird case where you can say you want to load manage him, but we also know that he's a guy who, when he doesn't play for a while, that's when the weight starts to be put on more, and then it's more of an injury hazard. So there's a reason I'm not one of the medical staff guys in the NBA. That's got to be one of the most unique situations to figure out the most optimal plan to keep him healthy for. I'm glad it's not my job, but health is the obvious thing in New Orleans. And obviously that's the concern. That's the make or break deal for them. If they can be healthy, like we saw last year during the first third to first quarter of the season, that's when they're going to be a very good team. There's no doubt about it. Outside of that, when you compare them where they were 12 months ago, like you were talking about, Gabe, where they did put up such a good showing against the Suns, I want to believe that they're better than that now for some reasons, but I also feel more negative about them than I did now for other reasons. I like their youth. There's no doubt about that. I think Trey Murphy is going to continue to improve. I think he's a really talented player. He started to show flashes in that postseason series, but that entire rookie season, he never got consistent run until the postseason. So that was just a little bit of the flashes. He has shown way more as an on-ball guy now than he ever did during that postseason where he was just a defensive guy and a catch-and-shoot wing. Dyson Daniels is someone who still has more upside. I'd like to see more from him as long as he can stay healthy going into this season. And they have some fun pieces there. Herb Jones hopefully can continue to improve his three-point shot, but is still always going to be an elite defender. That's the upside for me, but the biggest thing for me that I saw from this Pelicans team, or at least clearly I saw because I ranked him so damn high last summer, was CJ McCollum this year compared to where he was once he was traded for over 12 months ago. Looks like two completely different players. And that's not to say that he was terrible this past season, but he wasn't great. And for those 20 to 25 games he had in New Orleans and in that postseason run, he was great. It looked like some of the best basketball we'd ever seen CJ McCollum play. Finally being a full-time point guard, the playmaking was there, the shot creation was there, the on-ball responsibilities he looked very comfortable in. That we just haven't seen yet. And not to say that he's completely out of his prime at this point, that he's going to be completely falling off at his age, but I'm not confident we're ever going to see that return. And given the fact that BI is a good perimeter guy, but much more of a mid-range shooter than a three-point shooter, and Zion obviously is not a perimeter guy, come the postseason especially, CJ is kind of a type of guy that you would like to rely on and have a little bit more consistency from. So that's a point of hesitancy for me. The other point of hesitancy is JV, again, still good, but just was not as good last year. The role was not as significant. They just don't look to be seeming to get him as involved in the offense. He's not closing games anymore. They're opting to go with Larry Nance more at the 5 because they don't want JV out there defensively. We'll see how that goes with him and CJ. Those are the two biggest holding points for me outside of the health, but it comes down to the health at the end of the day. That's the biggest thing either way. But those are a few things that do worry me. I still think they're going to be good if Zion and BI can stay healthy, but those do hold me back a little bit as to thinking, can they be that team that was almost forcing a 1 seed to a game 7? I don't know if they're quite back there yet.
Yeah. You had CJ ranked high as hell, and everybody who knows me knows I'm a big CJ McCollum guy, but he was bad last year. Like, for his standards, for the way he played, like you mentioned, Devin, like when he got to New Orleans that second half of the 2022 season, he looked elite then. Compared to that, he looked bad last season. And his low moments were like very, very, very poor, especially in that play-in game. I just remember him just not being able to hit a shot. So he's obviously somebody that can bounce back this season. He could get back to how he was playing, or at least close to that level. But he's also of that age to where the regression could continue. And then they're going to be in the market for probably another guard, their third point guard of this regime potentially. So they got a lot of questions going into the season. I don't know what the answers are. I hope that they can figure out just health. I hope CJ can figure it out. I hope BI can stay on the court. I hope Zion can get, 50 games out of him. That's all hopeful, but we got to see it to believe it, honestly. And this just might be a team that might not be able to realize their potential because of all those factors.
Yeah, I do think one thing that works in their favor just regarding reaching that potential is the fact that, yes, CJ looked worse last season, but he was forced into a role a lot of times where he was the number 1 or number 2 guy on the court, when in reality, he probably should be your number 3 guy at max. And honestly, if JV is having a really good offensive night, CJ might be able to be managed as your 4th most prominent guy. Where he should be there, I think it might have been asking a bit much of him for a guy who's over 30 and should be starting to show some signs of regression. I don't expect him to get better as a player per se, but I do think that he can just kind of shine more by taking a step back, if that makes sense. Just seeing a little bit less of the defensive attention, kind of being a little bit more under the radar. But once again, that's going to rely on their 2 stars being there together. Also, one guy I want to shout out while we're still on this team. I know he did not look great in Summer League, at least from what I remember, but I do think the addition of Jordan Hawkins could really open up this offense as well. Talking about especially Zion on the court, who is a very in the paint, inside kind of guy. Having a shooter like that out there, if his shooting translates at a high level, that could be another thing that would really open Zion's game, because BI is a positive shooter. Trey Murphy's taking really good shots as an outside shooter. Then you have Jordan Hawkins out there. If you have a bunch of shooters around Zion, that offense could really be nasty.